Welcome to the second of 3 video lectures on Matthew Quick's young adult novel, Forgive Me, Leonard, Peacock. In this video lecture, I am going to address chapters 16 through 23, pages 95 through 170 of the novel, so right in the middle. And I am going to focus on Leonard's relationship with female characters in the book, Mrs. Shanahan in particular, and then quite a bit on Lauren. And I also am going to compare those relationships with women to Hamlet's relationship with women, particularly his mother Gertrude and to his girlfriend Ophelia, and try to draw some comparisons there and get us thinking about how the two works align. All right, so starting off, chapter 16, we meet Mrs. Shanahan. So Mrs. Shanahan, remember, she's the guidance counselor. And remember that Mrs. Giovatelli, earlier in the book, said that she was going to that she needed to contact guidance and let them know about Leonard's strange behaviors. In fact, teachers are mandated reporters. When they see strange behaviors in students, when they see warning signs, they are required by law to report those. And Mrs. Giovatelli does so. And here we see Mrs. Shanahan then calling in Leonard to talk to him and find out what's going on. So let's jump to, this is page 95. And let's go take a look more closely at this passage, starting with what's going on under the hat. What's going on under that hat, she asks. Just a haircut. Mrs. Giovatelli said, I'm not a very good barber, I'm afraid, I say, smiling and looking into her eyes all Hollywood. I'm a convincing actor when I need to be. I'd show you my new look right now, but I'm a little self-conscious about it, hence the hat. Can I swing by 8th period? Would be happy to show you then and talk about whatever you'd like. She looks into my eyes for a long time, like she's trying to tell whether I'm BSing her. Deep down, she absolutely knows I'm BSing her, I'm sure of it. But she has a million problems to solve, hundreds of students who need her help. Sounds a little bit like Vice Principal Torres earlier in the book, right? Vice Principal Torres is so overwhelmed, part of a system that's so overwhelmed, he can't take the time that Leonard needs to talk to him. Same thing we see with Mrs. Shanahan here. Hundreds of students who need her help, endless asshole parents to deal with, mountains of paperwork, meetings in that awful room with the round table and the window air conditioning unit they run even in winter, because the meeting room is directly over the tropically hot boiler room. And so that she knows the easiest thing to do is believe me. She's fulfilled her obligation, assuaged her conscience by finding me in the hallway and giving me the chance to freak out, and I've played my role too by remaining calm, pretending to be okay, and therefore giving her permission to cross me off her things to do list. Now she can move on, and I can too. Once you understand how adults are controlled by the system, manipulating them is elementary. This reference to the system, I think, is telling, although I don't agree with Leonard's perception of the system, and I think it's sad, his perception of the system, but this idea that there's a system in which we try to care for people, that's accurate. I've put aside a few root beer lollipops for you because I was getting low, she says, and then smiles back at me. If only you could solve all your problems with candy, I think. Mrs. Shanahan would be relevant. He's saying she's not relevant. She's irrelevant. We'll talk 8th period, right? Promise you'll come see me? I always look forward to a visit from Leonard Peacock. She says that last bit almost like she's flirting with me, like we're going to have sex in her office if I show up. I think this is an important characteristic we need to acknowledge in Leonard. Leonard is immature. In many ways, he's very mature. But in other ways, he's incredibly immature. And his views on women, that I want to address throughout the video lecture, reveal that immaturity. And here we see this. When he sees women, he cannot see them as full individuals, full human beings. He has to objectify women. He does that throughout the novel. He did it with Mrs. Giovatelli when he made references to her physical appearance. Now he's doing it with Mrs. Shanahan here too. Like we're going to have sex in her office if I show up. A lot of female teachers do this, flirt with male students. I wonder if that's the only way they know how to interact with men. And here we have an example of an unreliable narrator. I don't believe that Leonard's female teachers all are flirting with him. I think Leonard perceives so, and thus tells us they are, but I don't think they are, and I don't think Mrs. Shanahan here is either. There's nothing in the actual text, in her words, that suggests she's flirting with him. It's entirely Leonard's perception. I wonder if that's the only way they know how to interact with men. Like, they use their sexuality to get what they want. And I have to admit it works, because I really want to go see Miss Shanahan now. And if I hadn't already decided to kill myself, I would most certainly go to her office later, if only to collect my root beer lollipop and fantasize. So again, you see that immaturity in his relationships with women. He can only see them as objects, or mostly as objects, and something to be fantasized about. He can't see them acting in a way independent of them wanting to flirt with men or to use their sexuality to gain power. He has a very limited misogynistic perspective of women. And I think it's important that we point that out. And I think that then also informs or helps us better understand and think about our reading of Hamlet, or at least one possible reading of Hamlet when we get to that point. She sort of blushes and then smiles at me, all pleased with herself. All right, let's move on. I'm skipping over the letters. I'm going to come back to those. I do want to talk about those letters, but I'm going to, I'm skipping over them in this video lecture so that I can stay focused on his relationship with the various women he meets. I do want to pause, though, here in chapter 18 and talk about his relationship and introduce Herr Silverman. And in the next video lecture, in the third one, I will spend a lot more time on his relationship with Herr Silverman. But here, just enough to introduce him. And notice the contrast in how Leonard talks about Herr Silverman and how he talked about Mrs. Shanahan in the previous chapter, and before that about Mrs. Giavitella. First, we get the physical description. Herr Silverman stands tall, at 6'3" or so. His body type would best be described as wiry. Now keep in mind, Leonard earlier described himself as being tall, skinny. There are physical characteristics about Herr Silverman that align to and match up to Leonard's. And I would make the case that Herr Silverman is a wonderful character. Herr Silverman is the hero of this book. I wouldn't disagree with that. But I think part of the reason, in addition to Herr Silverman being just a wonderful, amazing human being, an amazing teacher, part of the reason, though, that allows Leonard to open up to him in a way that he can't do with Mrs. Shanahan, in a way that he can't do with Mrs. Giavitella, in a way he can open up to Herr Silverman because he can see himself in Herr Silverman. And significantly, he can see himself because they're male, but also they're both males of similar physical appearance. And therefore, Leonard, in his immaturity, is able to connect with Herr Silverman in a way he can't connect with individuals, in particular, of the opposite sex, with female characters. Going on, his hair is prematurely salt and pepper, and in 10 years or so it will be entirely silver, at which point his last name will be appropriate, Silverman. He always wears a solid color tie, a long sleeve white shirt, green, tan, or black pants with no pleats, black or brown suede lace-up shoes with a clunky heel, and a leather belt to match his shoes. So he looks professional, he looks the part. You can see Leonard seeing something of himself and also of something he would like to become if he goes on to become an adult. And we're going to see, okay, so Herr Silverman, an incredibly important character. We are going to spend a lot of time on him. Read Herr Silverman's lines closely. And especially before we do move on, I want to look a little bit more closely. Here we are. I do want to look at Herr Silverman's reaction to the gift. So remember, Leonard has put together these gifts for four various gifts for 4 different people. One of those is for Herr Silverman. And let's go ahead and look at this passage more closely. Read along with me. Herr Silverman smiles and says, "Why do I get a present?" This is page 115 in the paper book as well. Herr Silverman smiles and says, "Why do I get a present? I'll tell you after you open it." Okay, he says, and he then begins to peel off the pink paper very carefully. He opens a little box, looks up, raises his eyebrows, and says, "Is this what I think it is?" "Yeah, it's the Bronze Star Medal my grandfather was awarded for killing some high-ranking Nazi back in World War II. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Well, for a lot of reasons, most of which I can't really explain properly. That's why people give presents, right? Because they don't know how to express themselves in words. So you give gifts to symbolically explain your feelings. I got to thinking that the world would be a better place if they gave medals to great teachers rather than just soldiers who kill their enemies." And he goes on to sort of justify this. You hear a difference in his voice, though. There's a sort of timidness almost. There's a respect for Herr Silverman we haven't seen in his interactions with other characters. He feels a genuine connection to Herr Silverman. Herr Silverman, though, sees this for what it is. He sees this as a warning sign. Mrs. Giavitella saw the warning signs too. Herr Silverman's not the only one who did. Even though Leonard reacts differently to those to those two different characters seeing it, we've got multiple teachers, multiple parts of the system taking notice of Leonard's actions here and coming to his help. Herr Silverman is the most effective of these because Leonard's let him in. He says, Herr Silverman says, giving away treasured possessions, these are clear signs. Suicidal people often do these things. I'm worried that you might be at risk. Giavitella, Shanahan, they said something similar to this. They told Leonard they were worried about him. Leonard brushes them off. Herr Silverman, though, he has this relationship that makes that much more meaningful to Leonard. Let's scroll down just... And then I want to point this out too, because it's just so important, and we'll come back to this in video lecture 3. Herr Silverman takes a risk. He does something teachers normally don't do in high school, and he gives his phone number, his cell phone number, to Leonard and says, call me. Thank you, Leonard. Are you sure you're feeling okay? There's nothing else you'd like to discuss? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm off to see my guidance counselor right now, actually. Mrs. Giavitella already reported my strange behavior. I'm sure they'll be getting around to asking your professional opinion of my sanity. But I'm off to guidance now. So even if I were messed up, super counselor Mrs. Shanahan will fix me straight with a root beer lollipop before I leave the building. So no worries, right? And when I look to see if he's buying my lie, I can tell he isn't. So I say, I'm sorry I wrote on your desk. Do you want me to clean it? And Herr Silverman just sort of ignores the question, ignores the fact that he's written on his desk. That's not what's important right now, and Herr Silverman knows it. If I give you my cell phone number, will you promise to call me if you feel like you're going to kill yourself? I'm not going to. If you call, you can call anytime, day or night. Will you promise to at least call me first? Herr Silverman sees the signs. He knows he's at risk, and he's doing all he can to help. All right, we will come back, and we will talk much more about Herr Silverman, but I want to switch gears a little bit in this video lecture. And I want to jump and talk about and visit the passages where he interacts with Lauren. Now, Lauren is, he meets her in the subway. Remember, the book is set in Philadelphia, in the city. He takes the subway. Remember, that's how he met the 70s sunglass lady. He rides the subway train. He meets Lauren there as well. She's passing out pamphlets for her dad, for her church. Pamphlets to convince people to come to their church and to become Christians. He wants to kiss her as soon as he meets her. And again, this is revealing of Leonard's character and his relationship with women and the immaturity there that I've been talking about. The same immaturity he saw with Mrs. Shanahan. He's not able to sort of overcome these hormonal responses to Lauren and actually see her as a full human being. And she's a complicated and fascinating character, and he only is able to really scratch the surface of that. Page 135. I was going to say, I don't believe in hell, but I was determined to kiss Lauren Bogart style, Humphrey Bogart. So I didn't want to say anything that would end the conversation. I had seen enough bogey films to know that you have to ride out the insanity when it comes to beautiful women. Beautiful women are insane. That's what he's learned from Bogart. That's his takeaway. And even with all the crazy talk, Lauren seemed to get more and more attractive every time I looked at her. Also, this was the longest conversation I'd had with a girl my age, so I didn't want to blow it. He's 18. He should be immature. That's okay that he's immature. But it's just so important to talk about that and recognize that in this book. And that's where I want to keep coming back to that again and again in this video lecture, this immaturity with girls his own age, with women like Mrs. Shanahan who are older than him. Mrs. Giavitella, we get the sense, is even older than Mrs. Shanahan. He cannot interact in a meaningful, genuine way with the other female characters that he encounters, and that goes all the way back to his mother too. We don't see any meaningful interactions with women in the book. Let's keep going. Lauren convinces him to go to church, and here's him at church, and I think this also exemplifies more of this theme that Matthew Quick wants us to think about and realize, these relationships and how women are treated in this particular world that the novel creates. When we got to the front, Pastor Rose, that's Lauren's dad, Pastor Rose patted my back and said, "Are you the fish my Lauren reeled in this week?" Fish? I thought. This was getting even more bizarre. I guess so, I said, wondering why the hell he was wearing a graduation gown. You come to my office sometime and we'll talk man to man about the finer points of Christianity, okay? I prefer speaking with Lauren, I said, and he gave me a look that let me know that was definitely the wrong answer. But when you get serious about Jesus, I'll be here. Young men like you need mentors, and that's a man's job, son. Lauren's a fine Christian young woman, no doubt, but she brought you to us for a reason. You come see me, okay? He winked, I shit you not, and then shook the next person's hand, so Lauren and I moved on to lunch in this basement gym where tables and chairs had been set up and everything smelled of sweaty socks and pot roast. So what'd you think, Lauren asked me over plastic plates and red Solo cups. Oops. Church was okay, I guess. I liked the singing part and the organ, but mostly the whole thing just seemed sort of silly to me. I was smart enough not to say that to Lauren. Instead, I went on into bogey mode and said, "You look very pretty in that dress." It was a deep violet number, knee-length with spaghetti straps. She was like one of those exotic plants that lure insects into their sticky, sweet traps and then eat them. I think his metaphor here is telling. This is how he sees women, how he sees beautiful women. Mrs. Shanahan was using her sexuality the way all female teachers do. Same thing. Lauren's using her sexuality to become like an exotic plant, like a Venus flytrap, to lure insects in. He's the insect being lured in. Thank you, she said. So do you think you want to give your life to Jesus? I was just about to lie when this muscly blonde football player looking kid snuck up behind Lauren and started to massage her shoulders. Hey, Buttercup, he said. Buttercup? Really? Hey, Lauren said, in a way that let me know this wasn't just any old church member. You look like the Johnny kid in the pamphlet, and nothing like me. Leonard, this is my boyfriend, Jackson. Jackson, this is Leonard. I hear you're serious about making Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior, Jackson said to me. It's definitely the way to go. Do you enjoy parking? I asked, although not sure why. Probably because I was angry and just wanted to leave. I felt so tricked by Lauren. Being eaten by her was one thing, but introducing me to her boyfriend after she'd led me on, that was completely, entirely unacceptable. She used her femme fatale skills to get me into her church, bait and switch style, when she already had a boyfriend who was much more normal looking than me, a completely different type. So again, his anger here. He was at this church only because he liked Lauren, he wants to kiss Lauren, and now he feels entirely betrayed. Lauren never says anything to lead him on, ever. Let's jump down. So this is in the past. This is not on his 18th birthday. This whole scene, both when he first met her, this visiting the church, this is all flashback. Let's jump forward. And let's go back to his 18th birthday. And so here he is going to give her... this is where he's going to give her her present. So he gave Harris Silverman the war medal. Here, he's going to try to give her a cross that he's bought for her. Let me scoot this over and out of the way a little bit. And this moment that we're about to look at is the kiss, and it's a forced kiss. I want us to pay really close attention to the way that this fails and how it affects Leonard. And also, I want to be able to have a discussion later about your reaction to this passage. I think it's a really telling and important passage to understanding Leonard's character and his relationship with Lauren, but more broadly, from a feminist reading of the text, understanding the book. I just start to effing cry. I'm not sure why. Man, I bawl and bawl. She hugs me and I clutch her, sob into her neck that smells like vanilla extract baking inside cookies. So effing wonderful. So he's emotionally a mess, but the hormones are still raging, right? And we can hear that. And it's a contradiction. Maybe it's a normal, in some ways, maybe it's a normal contradiction for an 18-year-old male to be going through this sort of frustration. One who's never even had a prolonged conversation with a girl his own age. The sad suits and briefcases passes in droves, but no one even seems to notice us as I drink her up. God works in mysterious ways, she says, and rubs my back all motherly. This world is a test. It's hard, but I will continue to pray for you. We could pray together. You could come to church with me. It would help you. My father will help you too. She's saying all these really nice things, trying to comfort me the only way she knows how. Again, just like Miss Shanahan. He thinks Miss Shanahan only knows how to communicate with men through her sexuality. The same thing with Lauren. She only knows how to communicate through her physical connection that she's making, the physical touch, and through her belief her Christianity. These are the only ways she knows. For Leonard, his understanding of women is incredibly limited, or he believes their understanding is incredibly limited in terms of how they can interact with people. But really, in many ways, it's Leonard. This is reflective of Leonard and his limitations dealing with women. And then we have him start to kiss her. I just love being on someone's radar so much that I start kissing her neck and then her mouth. Our tongues touch, and she kisses me back for a fraction of a second. Her mouth is so warm and wet and minty from the gum she's chewing, and my heart's pulsing spikes of adrenaline through my veins, which is exciting and animalistic and primal, but maybe not quite what I was expecting, because I thought kissing Lauren would be like the epic kisses in the bogey films, like the string section would kick in, and I get that swirling feeling Babak's playing produces, and Lauren would pause to gaze at me and say, "I like that, I'd like more," just like McCall says in that infamous husky voice to Bogey in The Big Sleep. And when I kissed her glossy battleship gray lips again, she'd say, "That's even better." But instead it's just the hot, sweaty rush of bodies mangling when they maybe shouldn't even be mingling, and she tries to push me away, but the rush forces me to hold on to her tight, even though I want to let go, even though I should really let go. So the kiss starts off as consensual, but somewhere it's slipped into something that's not consensual, and that's where it becomes forced, right? This is the moment where we have a problem. Go! I really should let go. So she turns her face from my mouth and yells, "Stop!" in this high-pitched squeal that is the complete antithesis of McCall's warm, sexy, brassy voice. And when I keep kissing her cheek and ear, so he keeps going after us, we've got a clear stop. He keeps going with the heel of her hand. I keep kissing her cheek and ear. She smashes my chin with the heel of her hand, jolting my brain back to reality and knocking off my Bogart hat in the process. I stagger backward and then pick up my fedora. This is his relationship with women throughout the play, or throughout the book, right? And I think, if we are taking, forgive me, Leonard Peacock, and thinking about it as a way or a window into another understanding of Hamlet, or if we think about this as a response to Hamlet, then it serves us at this point, as we come to the end of chapter 23 here, to think about in the ways that Ophelia matches Lauren, and the way that Hamlet's relationship with women matches or contrasts to those that Leonard has. So remember from reading Hamlet, Hamlet doesn't like women who wear makeup. He makes that point at least twice explicitly. He thinks that somehow that's something fake. I think would be the 21st century word for that. It's inauthentic when they wear makeup. They're disguising their true features, right? And thinking of Act 3, Scene 1, the nunnery scene, when Hamlet tells Ophelia, "Get thee to a nunnery," and says you'll be nothing more than a breeder of sinners. We see some of the same, I think we see, and this is I want to have this conversation more deeply, so we'll have some further discussion on this in class. I think Hamlet has some similar limitations to Leonard, or at least that's Matthew Quick's reading, or that's one reading of Hamlet. He cannot fully see women. He sees them as being a trap or trying to trick men into behaving certain ways. He certainly sees his mother, has a problematic perspective of his mother and her relationship both with his father, well, not so much with his father, but in particular with his uncle. These are sort of the same kinds of conflicting ideas in Hamlet that I think we see drawn out in a different way, or in a more 21st century version in Leonard, right? So if Leonard is a Hamlet-like character, then he shares, inevitably, Hamlet's weaknesses. And I think we have to acknowledge that one of Hamlet's weaknesses is his own misogyny. And we see that in Leonard drawn out here too. And I think the textual evidence that we've looked at in this video lecture really kind of help point out some of the major spots where we can pinpoint, here's where Leonard said something or perceived the world in a really misogynistic way, culminating here with this forced kiss where he's told no, but keeps going, and cannot control his own behavior with Lauren. All right, I will close out our second video lecture here. In our third video lecture, we'll finish out the book, and then we'll switch our focus in talking about Asher and talking about Herr Silverman and what those characters represent both within the novel itself and then in comparison to Shakespeare's tragedy, Hamlet. Thank you, and see you for the next video lecture.